Assalamu alaikum and hello and welcome to the Convert Show here on Radio Ramadan, London. There's of course myself, which is Andrew Barson. I'm a member of the Convert Muslim Foundation. There's also my co-host, Auntie Batool Al Toma, who's also connected with the Convert Muslim Foundation, and our guest tonight, who is Safia Florence Ascoli Ball. You're listening to us on 87.9 FM, and if you'd like to join us, you can join us on Facebook or YouTube. You'll find us on Facebook under Radio Ramadan London, and also on the website, which is ramadanradio.org. So I'll just give you a brief introduction in terms of what we're going to be talking about this evening. So Allah gifted Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, with the best of wives and companions. May Allah be pleased with them. And they helped him and supported him through his most difficult times. And he was very rarely alone. Likewise, he was a friend back to his companions and a good husband to his wives. With the backdrop of COVID-19, many of us will have felt the pains of separation, but others may have formed new friendships, which may have blossomed as communities came together to help each other in this time of difficulty. In the light of this background, we felt it apt that tonight we'll discuss the impact of spouses and friends upon converts during their spiritual journey and things that we're thankful for. Joining us, like I said previously, we have Auntie Batool, who will be co-hosting with me tonight. And also we have the pleasure of Safia Florence Ascoli Ball. She's a French convert to Islam of 24 years, living in Manchester, married to a son of English converts, and mother of 4 teenagers, that's a handful, who are home educated. She is a translator, a pilot's instructor, and a Taekwondo black belt second dan, so no messing about this evening, and her aim is to help women to be healthy and confident. She's currently working on a Ramadan series on YouTube of interviews of Muslim personalities who share their thoughts on their favourite verses for the Public Quran campaign. Please go and check that out if you can, that she and her husband set up. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Assalamu alaikum, Batool
Alaikum.
and Andrew. It's very nice to see you, although virtually, but it's very nice to be in your presence. Alhamdulillah.
It's nice to have you back, and nice to also have my co-host with me again as well, Auntie Batool.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Andrew. I'm not sure that I'm auntie, really, am I? I mean,
well,
age-wise?
You're auntie to several people.
But
I'm going to keep with it, if you don't mind. But
okay.
It sounds a bit like an anti-agony, which, you
Yes,
know,
an
maybe
agony
you
aunt.
are, yes, agony
Yes.
aunt. So,
Well, considering
which you are.
the last phone call I just had before I came online, definitely it was going down the agony route.
Oh dear, oh dear.
if
Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah.
it makes you feel better, I will call you Sister Batool instead.
Or just Batool will do fine.
Batool, okay. So beginning our first half, most listeners will have been aware of recent, obviously in the news, that the Queen lost her partner of 73 years, the Duke of Edinburgh. And it's always very painful to lose a partner of, you know, over any period of time. But particularly in these days of the COVID-19 lockdowns, many people may have had to spend time away from their partners or their spouses. Or many people might have had their lives enriched and certainly made better by having their partner alongside them during the difficult time. So we felt what better way than to take some time and reflect on the spouses that we have and some of the positives that they give us, particularly in terms of our own spiritual journeys, but also in general in terms of the kind of support that we've found from our spouses. So we want to show a lot of thanksgiving for tonight, and we want to show a lot of love if we can. So I just want to ask kind of like both Batool and Safia, the question we're going to start off with is just how important are spouses in the spiritual journey of converts? And if we go to Batool first.
Assalamu alaikum. This is a difficult one, really, because, you know, spouses, friends, all sorts of people that you come to meet and know during the process of your conversion and the continuing conversion journey can be either way. They can be, good and bad, or they can be helpful and or not really. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of converts to Islam, particularly women, they're often rushed into marriages, and so some may make choices, or may have choices kind of forced upon them that might not be the greatest choices, and may not bring with that choice a spouse that is understanding, thoughtful, caring, and sometimes if your spouse is from a different part of the world, there's often this difficulty in trying to relate to that person. So it can be a bit of a rocky beginning. But generally speaking, I think a lot of converts to Islam, particularly here in the UK, we're kind of, we're made of sterner stuff, stiff upper lip and all that kind of thing. And as I always used to say, conversion to Islam is not for the faint-hearted. So a lot of people who convert to Islam, they generally settle into this sort of marriage and spousal, relationships after a little period of time, growing pains and teething problems and so on. And generally things are quite good. And I would say that after, a period of getting to know somebody, I think they settle down into a marriage where they really start enjoying each other's company. I mean, my husband in particular, Allah yarhamu, because he's passed away now, and he will have passed 6 years this November. But I mean, and it's sad to be without him in Ramadan time, particularly because we used to go to Taraweeh prayer together, come home, have our iftar together. And, obviously when the children were all little, we had our little gatherings as a family and so on and so forth. And you miss that. You miss that person's presence in your life and what his presence brought in terms of that supportive element that you need at difficult times, particularly when you're fasting. And I was a bit of a really grumpy old thing on the long day fasts. By the time we got to about, 2 o'clock, I was beginning to wilt. Whereas he was much stronger and much more sturdy about it all. But you see, when I converted to Islam first, I converted into those long fasting days. It was around July, August time. And I dread Ramadan because of it, because I dreaded it then. And I've never lost that kind of dread. So he was a great help in that respect. Again, it took us a while to get used to each other. He would start trying to tell me jokes. I'd still be waiting for the punchline 5 minutes after he'd finished. So, it was a kind of a hit and miss kind of relationship there all the time. But it was good. It was really good. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you've touched on quite a few things there in terms of that kind of shared experience of some of the practical aspects of the faith. Such as fasting and also prayer, just simple prayer and praying together as a family. But also you raise the characteristic of sense of humour, which I always think is important for couples as well. I happen to share a really bad sense of humour with my wife. It's the one thing that we do have in common. But Safia, how does that relate to your own experiences?
Yes, I totally agree with everything that Batool has said. And when I converted, I was 27. So I was already quite a bit more mature, I think, than if I had been 20, 21, 22. I had a lot more life experience. I'd been working in London. I'd been living on my own or sharing houses, but like away from my family, who still lives in France. So when I became a Muslim, it was a process of so many years. And I always wanted to get married. But before being a Muslim, no one really gets married at a young age. They wait until years later. So that was like really, really high on my list of priorities. Now that I'm a Muslim, I want to get married and I'm going to actively look for a husband. And I spread the word. I said, I'm looking. And so I was introduced to people here and there. Some people came to me, because obviously I'm a convert, so I have to be perfect and the perfect wife for so-and-so's brother, so-and-so's son. Alhamdulillah. And there were a few mishaps. Alhamdulillah, Rabbana Kareem. Allah always protected me from the wrong decision, because not wrong because it would have been a disastrous marriage in terms of maybe abuse or anything, but it just would not have been the right person for my personality. And I think what a lot of very well-intended sisters, born Muslim and really active into their practice and their deen, just said, well, Sophia, really, it just has to be Muslim, just has to be a good Muslim. And inside me, I thought, no, it has to be more than this. Andrew, you were mentioning, and Batool, you were mentioning sense of humor, being relaxed about life, being streetwise, being just not stiff in their practice of the religion was really important. But on top of that, intellectual connection was for me really, really high on the list. So second, I think, on my criteria, because I just love thinking. I love analyzing, I love reading, I love discussing things, I love challenging. And one of the brothers that I nearly married, why we did not go ahead with it, was he realized I was too much of an extrovert. And one of the questions he asked me, he said, he was incidentally a French convert to Islam, but leaning towards more sort of a certain branch of Islam where they really wanted to follow like a sheikh. He was kind of towards Salafism and stuff. And he said, well, what would happen if we disagree on an issue? Because there was something he said and I challenged him when we were discussing. And I said, well, I'll just do like I did now. I'll just go and look for my proofs and you look for your proofs and we discuss it and see what's the best option. No, that was just too much. So I think it doesn't mean that's a wrong approach. It just means as a person, I was, alhamdulillah, blessed, and I encourage now new converts to really be aware of what your priorities are, what your needs are, your personality, what makes you tick. There's nothing wrong with wanting to laugh or have fun or discuss things in a very serious way and debate. You have a voice and you have a brain, use them. But I think when you're young, very young, you might be intimidated. And also when you're new to Islam, you kind of hear and are made to feel like you really don't know anything. But what I always say to people saying, I'd love to marry a convert. And I said, oh, are you ready for it? Because someone who's converted, seriously, you all know what I'm talking about. We've converted to Islam. We used our brain for it. We challenged things. We went against our families, our culture, our friends, our environment, everything that we knew. We had such a big upheaval. So don't think that by marrying me, you'll be able to mold me into something you think is the right wife or the right Muslim. And this is why a lot of marriages struggle, because there's this complete misunderstanding and the expectations are just misplaced. So alhamdulillah, I made my dua and I had my very precise list of criteria that I wanted to find. I was not going to find everything, obviously, but the really important ones were at the top. He has to be obviously practicing sincere Muslim. He has to be someone intellectual. He has to be someone who thinks, not someone who follows necessarily blindly. These are just my personal things. He has to be handsome. He has to be, taller than me. That's easy because I'm really only 5'3". So, this sort of things. And I really, really made a lot of dua. And I met, there was something as well, which is interesting. As a convert, it was important for me that his family was going to be Muslim, because I felt like for the children, not necessarily for me, but for the future children, I wanted them to experience what I'd experienced as a loving, caring family, with Christmas, with the family reunions, the things. And I wanted them to have that from a young age, from the Muslim perspective, because I knew my family was going to give them that from the Christian perspective. And I met I was introduced basically to a friend's brother, and they were second generation Muslim, really converts themselves, because they'd gone through ups and downs, but they considered themselves converts, but their parents were converts as well from the 1970s. So I was really, and my mother-in-law was widowed, young, and remarried an Egyptian professor. So I am now thrown into this multicultural family that has been really absolutely amazing, amazing support, and they just welcomed me like their daughter. And we just get along like house and fire, to be honest, as if I had been born into that family. But originally was when I converted to Islam, was meeting a group of people as well that supported me a lot. So there's this as well, that aspect of having very, very good support network and friendships when you convert.
That's really good to hear, and I think there's some nice elements of that. And I don't know if Sister Batool will agree with me, but the idea of one, I think you knew some elements of what you didn't want as well as what you wanted, which I think is sometimes really important when looking for a partner, and certainly something that I kind of learned a little bit the hard way, I would say, having made a few mistakes myself. One of the other nice things about that is the understanding that there will be some crossover of culture. And perhaps is that one of the things, because I've always been amazed at some of my friends' spouses in terms of how they have not gone outside the boundaries of Islam, but have been able to deal with contexts and situations that wouldn't usually be found in the context of Islam, but been able to adapt them, or been able to make them more comfortable so that they don't make the non-Muslim family feel uncomfortable. How important do you feel that is? And I'll go to Safia first, and then Sister Batool afterwards.
So do you mean like in terms of what, celebrations or?
So in terms of, say, just family occasions and respecting, or at least kind of understanding the kind of the fact that the families will do things slightly differently when they're non-Muslim as opposed to Muslim. How much has that kind of impacted on your ability to feel comfortable as a Muslim?
Well, originally, I would say I was quite strict. There's a lot of things that I didn't do and didn't take part with my birth family, my non-Muslim family. And I think it was because I needed to strengthen myself. I needed to feel well established in my new skin, new culture as a, European Muslim living in Britain. And I felt like it was important to protect myself. There were certain things that I did not miss. Was Christmas. I had to be there. And my parents were gracious enough to adapt the meals and make sure they would not cook any pork and have halal meat. But the alcohol was there. But the way alcohol is drunk in France is a bit different. It's with a meal, and it's not really with the aim of becoming drunk. So it was manageable. But when we had children, so yes, I just didn't miss these things because living abroad, that was really my only opportunity to see my whole family all together. Otherwise, I think if I'd been living in France, I might have avoided it and just gone the day after or a couple of days later. But coming from abroad, it wasn't really possible. When I got married, I just had a new family, and it gave me the strength to tell my parents I'm not coming this Christmas. I'm going to stay in London with my new family we'd just got married like a month before. So I had seen my family at my wedding, and I felt like I said, look, I'd like to stay here. It was hard because I really enjoyed the family gathering, but it was kind of a way of breaking away from these celebrations, which started to feel like a little bit too much. And also, when we started having our children, we felt like we were going to visit my family often, but try and avoid the Christmas time, the actual Christmas Eve, really, where the main celebration happens. because we wanted first them to really feel the Eid celebrations, the family, the Muslim customs, before they, become too excited about it, too much into the Christian celebrations. And when they were older, much older, so above 10, most of them, then we started going back for certain different reasons. It was just more practical. We went to celebrate. It's not like really celebrating Christmas, celebrating the family gathering at the time of Christmas, because my family is not practicing really. And it was really lovely. And the children I love, they remember, yes, they have a Christmas tree. Yes, we have a nice meal. It's all decorated, but now it's part of their culture and the good memories with my parents, but in a way that they can sort of rationalize it and compare it with Eid, which is for them, they understand it's the same family celebration, but it is the two main celebrations for them, and that they really look forward to because it's part of their religion. So alhamdulillah, it kind of works out quite well.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, it sounds as if the kind of balance has come there with the fact that your partner's been able to give you that kind of sense of grounding in the Islam, and kind of share their festivals, but feel like you've got a good grounding in Islam. Sister Batool, what's your experiences with this?
Yes, we're kind of losing you,
having
Andrew.
That cultural understanding, or let's say adaptability. Oh,
Andrew, we're losing you slightly because of your connection. But anyway, I understand what you're saying. I think it was different for me, actually. I was born and brought up on a farm in Ireland, and I was one of 10 children. So, my family were really, really important to me. And when I became Muslim, everything kind of just literally blew up, and things went very badly downhill and so on. So I my marriage as well wasn't one that was thought out as deeply and fundamentally as Sophia's. I just basically was in the mosque, and people were introducing me to all sorts of people for marriage who stepped into the mosque for whatever reason. And so, because I was living in Ireland, and I'm not sure that the community there really knew what to do with me. I was a bit of a loose cannon, maybe, or, they were just trying to sort of see that I was married and maybe, had some support of my own and stuff, which wasn't necessarily the best thing at that particular time. But anyway, so I met and married my husband in one weekend. Met him on Friday evening. We got married on Sunday afternoon. So it was a bit quick, really, a bit fast and furious. And he was from Iraq. And, it's interesting because I think looking back on it now and looking at conversion to Islam over the past maybe 20, 30 years, you'll find that a lot of the spouses of converts to Islam are generally people who are married to them because of the difficulties back in their own countries. Like there was a problem with Libya, and a lot of Libyans were married to English convert ladies. Problem with Iraq, a lot of Iraqis were married to convert English ladies. All sorts of historical situations and war-torn situations meant that there's a pattern maybe with converts to Islam and who they marry. And in fact, it was interesting that a few days ago, an Irish lady said to me, well, she's not Irish, she's European convert to Islam who lives in Ireland. And she was saying, I started fasting, and this lovely Syrian family invited me to iftar, and they were talking to me and saying to me, we can find you a lovely Syrian husband. And I was thinking, here it goes again, because obviously, Syria has gone through so much. And obviously there are Syrians, who have come into the country because of the situation there, and mashallah, barakallah, Allah, help them to get to this country and to be safe, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're ideal marriage material, because they're coming from a background. Although I have to say Syrian people are lovely people, and mashallah, those who are Muslim and good practicing Muslims are of the best people. But I would sort of caution everybody in relation to marriages and going into marriage, and making sure that, that they're not being rushed into something, and that they're taking the time to ensure that that person is ideally suited to them, or at least best suited to them as far as possible. About the family, I mean, for me then, obviously that had a knock-on effect, because I never had any contact, physical contact, with my husband's family, because they were back in Iraq, a war-torn country. We couldn't go there. He couldn't go there. So that side of the family, as opposed to what Sophia said, and when you talk about Sophia as your family, I feel I missed that out completely, which was really devastating for my children, because we lost that side of the family, that Islamic, practicing Muslim side of the family, that wonderful, sort of sharing, caring, full of heartfelt love and affection for you and for the children. Not to say that my family are not full of, compassion and care and all that sort of thing. With 10 in a family, it has to be a compassionate family, and very God-centered as well, but quite, Islamic, a Catholic family. So I used to go back to my family quite a lot, because I was trying to rebuild bridges that were broken down, and my mum and dad were the best of people, and I really needed to kind of, build that relationship again that was fragmented and fractured because of me converting to Islam and going off to marry somebody who they never imagined was going to be a family member. Obviously, your parents have dreams of what's going to happen and how you're going to be and so on. But alhamdulillah, we've patched it up, and things, patched it being I suppose the working word there. It became unpatched every time something happened. But it was, my family are a lovely family, and my children got to know all their aunts and uncles and so on. And yes, Christmas was one of those times that we used to spend quite a lot of time in Ireland with my family, because 10 children, 10 spouses, cousins, I mean, it just grew and grew. And that was it. But, and that's why I always feel like, that, spending Christmas with your family is fine. It's not going to dilute my Islam in any way, shape or form, or water it down in any way, shape or form. I don't see any difference between me going to see my family, when one of them has a birthday or one of them has a wedding, compared to one of, it's Christmas. It's just, to me, it's nothing other than another celebration, and all the family are together.
It's quite unusual, and it's really interesting to see the kind of the differences between yourself and Safia. And it's kind of, so I'm reflecting this back on my own self, and I don't know how rare, I'm saying for the benefit of the listeners, I don't know how rare my situation is in terms of the fact that I'm actually married to a convert, and I don't know how often that happens to a certain extent. But it's kind of like we were both converts, and we both converted. We weren't too far apart in terms of our conversions. But we obviously we come from the same background, so we've both inherited two non-Muslim families rather than one Muslim family and one non-Muslim family. So for us, in comparison, I'd say that's meant a lot of adaptation and invention somewhat. Yeah. The one thing I would call out for is certainly on my family's side, they've been very good in terms of indulging certain things. We've kind of decided that Eid al-Adha, it certainly matches fish and chips, and so the rule was for quite a few years that we would have fish and chips on Eid al-Adha, and that would be me, my brother, my sister, and my mum, and we would all get together and we would have fish and chips on that day.
That's lovely.
To celebrate Eid al-Adha, and they're not Muslims, but they just,
No, that's great. Yeah.
do something for it, to do something.
I think, I think what you're saying is, and from Batool's, what you just said, if you, even if you have Muslim family, non-Muslim family, whatever it is, when you grow up and you have your family, your own family, you end up doing your own circle. I mean, we were not living nearby my in-laws or my family, so because we live in Manchester, they live in London, and the rest of my family in France. So ultimately, we had to develop very, very close friendships, the uncles and aunties, because in Islam, it's got, I like this very, very much, this idea of showing respect to the older generation. You know, the one above, you always call them auntie and uncle. And so my children had loads of aunties and uncles who were not related to them at all, but they had lots of then adoptive cousins, and we had very, very close, we still have very, very close friends, families, whose children we've all grown together. So even if, if anybody who listens to us and feels like, or like you, Andrew, has no Muslim family around, or the Muslim family lives abroad and far, like it was for you, Batool, like that, ultimately, even for people who have the family around, you don't spend every single day with those families anyway. So you can create your own network around who become nearly like family, don't they?
Well, I have to say, that's a lovely segue into the second half of the program, necessarily. I just want to remind people that obviously you're listening to Radio Ramadan London, and you're listening to The Convert Show with me, Andrew Barson, and my co-host, Sister Batool Toma, and our guest today, which is Safia Florence Ascoli Ball. And you can get in touch with us on 077 614 60614, and you can also follow us on Facebook as well. So the latter part of the session, I was going to turn over towards talking about the kind of friends, but I'm going to leave it kind of generally wide and say that we can, because lockdown has been hard for a lot of people. Lockdown has been very tough with COVID-19, and we've not had that face-to-face interaction with other people. And I think that the phrase is very true, especially today, which is the idea that you don't know what you've got until it's gone. And we can take a lot for granted in terms of our interactions with friends and Muslim friends or Muslim friends even, who have helped us through difficult times. So I'm just interested, I'm going to go to Batool first, but I was interested to see kind of in terms of what stories you might have in terms of things that have helped us in the past, or what kind of things have friends done for us.
Well, I mean, for me, I had to start working from home. And so because I'm not that technically savvy, I had to get used to a lot of things very quickly, particularly obviously this Zoom business and so on. And so I was very busy, always out and working and interfacing with society and with the public quite a lot. And for me, quite honestly, I think COVID was a godsend, really, in terms of when we had the lockdown last March, and then which was really kind of a novelty, kind of like, oh, everybody's at home, we've all got to go into our house. And I remember Facebooking, a message on Facebook saying, oh, I got up this morning and I actually made my bed. And everybody said, oh, some spoiled sports were coming on and saying, I make my bed every morning. And I was thinking, oh, yeah, okay, fine. Well, I don't. I'm busy and I jump out and I have to go somewhere. And so, that's it. But then, the novelty wore off after a while, my bed making novelty kind of wore off after a while. I thought, oh, just leave it there. And but then I was working at my, at my kitchen table, my dining room table, and getting used to Zoom and all the rest. And I actually found the whole experience of Ramadan last year absolutely wonderful in terms of the quietness of the house, of the space around me, of myself, my own heart, my own mind. I found that, I sort of wound down from that racing kind of lifestyle I had. And suddenly I was with myself and with God. And so I just loved it. I loved it so much. There was no rushing off the Taraweeh prayer, rushing back, having iftar, all this kind of stuff. And suddenly my life, sort of slowed down to a complete standstill. And I found that wonderful. And I found it really easy to cope with. My husband obviously wasn't with me, so I was in the house by myself. And I think even then, it just was that quietness and thinking about him and thinking about, when he passed away and what we would have been doing together, maybe now, in this quiet time, was interesting. It was certainly, it was lonely, I think, in a sense. But then, you had lots of friends over Zoom. So you set up this whole new internet structure for yourself where you could have meetings and meet people and everything. So in one way you were cut off, but in another way, thankfully you weren't. And we all got used to these new methods of keeping in contact and communicating with each other, which was fantastic. And I think the whole, our lives have changed hugely on account of it. SubhanAllah. And I mean, next Saturday, 1st of May, we will have our Ramadan retreat, and that will be on Zoom, and we'll have everybody coming in to the screen and interacting with each other that way. So, it's it's taught us a lot of lessons.
I would say it sounds as if you've been able to kind of reflect on a few, reflect on perhaps people that you've lost, but also been able to keep in touch quite a lot. And I do agree. I think those networks are quite important. I'm going to sound like I'm obsessed with food, but we started off a thing in our family where we would call each other on WhatsApp every Friday and have takeaway. I will stress, my entire life is not guided around takeaway, but food does play an important part with any family event, I would say.
Absolutely.
This is it. Yeah, you find ways of coping with new situations, I suppose. But I think as human beings, we do enjoy. We do thrive, not enjoy. We do thrive with the actual direct human connection.
Yes.
And I have reached, I think, after a year, I think we can have reached that point of saturation. This year's a bit better in terms of Ramadan because we're better organized. There's a lot more going on Zoom compared to last year. But last year, yeah, we had already the Ramadan retreat online, which was just like a nice to have because that was the only thing we could have. But it was by far not as enjoyable. You see what I mean? As the real Ramadan retreat where, for those who don't know, it's basically a big camp near Leicester where we all gather and have talks and lectures and spend the whole night drinking tea and chatting. But it's not just that, it's the family reunion that, again, we go back to that idea of creating your new network, your new family environment. And for my children, certainly the retreat that they've been going to since birth is their second home. This is the happy place where they can get together with so many children their age, teenagers. I mean, some of them they've known since childhood, very little, and they only see them once a year. Obviously cousins and their real cousins of family cousins and stuff. So there is a point where
people I can imagine have been with you since the first days of conversion for you.
Yeah, and I feel as well for the converts nowadays who have converted. I know, and Mr. Batool, you have, Andrew, you have come across them who have converted through lockdown because maybe they had more time to think about these things and explore. And how I would have been when I converted. We had no internet. It was 1997. It was just it's in its infancy. I had to look through the yellow pages to know what my local mosque was, and I knew no one. And alhamdulillah, Allah answered my prayer when I decided I was going to be a Muslim. After researching, and I started fasting. It was Ramadan, and I like you, Batool. It was in January. It was super easy. But for me, it was a big challenge because I'd never done that before. I'd never delayed anything in terms of food and drink. No chance. But for God, for God, I did it. And he put someone in my path. I just made a dua to make me meet someone like me who would introduce me to a family. And I just stepped into this bus, and next to me sat this girl who was really well wrapped up in winter, hat and gloves and scarf and everything. And she was reading this book about learning how to read the Quran, how to learn Arabic. So I thought, this is my chance, at least to find out he's there. So I asked her, so thinking it's London, people talk to each other, it's okay. Is there Arabic lessons around here? I'd love to learn Arabic. And she looked at me like sheepishly. Well, I don't really learn Arabic just for the language, but to be able to read the Quran. And I looked at her, and then I looked at her better. And okay. And she looked really well wrapped up. I couldn't see her hair or anything. And she said, actually, I just converted to Islam. And I was like, oh my God, you're a godsend. You're the answer to my prayer the day after. So again, that's another lesson. Never give up on making your dua, because Allah does answer. And she became a very, very close friend of mine. And incidentally, she's Asya Eleanor Martin from Khayal Theatre Company, and her husband Luqman Ali. At the time, Khayal didn't exist. I was part of the initial team that set it up. And she introduced me to her husband, who was Luqman, and that's how I took my Shahada. And they introduced me to this huge community that became just like my family and nurtured me. So yes, I feel really for these Muslims who new Muslims who maybe have not had the opportunity of those physical connection, of the warmth of being close to someone, sitting next to someone to be able to pray, the hugs. When I took my Shahada, the heart-to-heart hugs, like you feel you just, I don't know.
The odd thing with that is that it's the one thing that filled me with dread when I first converted, because I wasn't used to the idea of 30 men getting up and hugging.
Yes, so I'm French. I love hugging and kissing cheeks and stuff.
But then
yes,
following on from that, and then every Ramadan, and it's such a key part of the Eid prayer, and I do think it's one of those things that I miss a lot. And because we've got a fairly small mosque in Markfield, it means that we're not stuck there for hours trying to go around everybody, but you can physically do the whole room in about 20 minutes, which is comfortable, and I'm okay with that. And I would say, I'd say a great big thank you to along to Sister Batool, and also lots of different families and brothers and sisters who attend the Markfield Mosque. And I think for me, kind of like one of the things that I remember in terms of being welcomed into that community was I had free offers of dinner from different people, but I also had there was a family who used to invite us around for tea after Jummah. And I used to go around for a cup of tea and just a chat, and sometimes other things as well. And it was just nice to have somewhere else that was Muslim. There's like so somewhere else I can go. This was before I was married, and it meant that it meant that we felt a bit more connected to the community somewhat. We've only got.
I think when I came to Islam first, it was through the Malaysian community in Dublin. And actually, I met them purely on a social basis. It wasn't to do with anything to do with Islam. I mean, that came in later when I began to notice certain things about them that I thought were slightly, odd in comparison to, other people and other Irish people and other communities I knew. But I mean, those people, who do embrace you at that time, as you did, the experience you had, Sophia, you never forget those people. They of live on with you all your life, you know, just crisscrossing, you know, here and there throughout your life, and the odd phone call and the meeting, and the little kind of experience of getting together as a family again and so on. You never forget them. And they, you know, they come up frequently in your dua. You know, the fact that they plucked you out of a particular situation at a specific time when it meant so much to you. And there are all sorts of people like that peppered all over the world, in my case, from Algeria to Syria to, you know, the Middle East, Malaysia, you know, all sorts of places. And I just think about them all so much, especially now in Ramadan time. And inshallah, that they are enjoying.
I'd go so far as to make a dua on that and say that may Allah find us all warm hearts and warm embraces.
Inshallah.
That's what we're talking about necessarily. I just want to finish on a note in the fact that in the 23 years of revelation, the Sahaba and the Prophet's wives were by the Prophets in good times and in bad. And because of their devotion to Islam and their support, a veritable treasure trove of hadiths has been stored, which is a cornerstone of our religion, enriching 23 years of revelation and sunnah. Brotherhood and sisterhood are definitely cornerstones of Islam and are so important in creating a sense of belonging for the convert, so that we know that we don't have to walk alone, as the song says. But thank you very much for joining us, Safia, and thank you very much for co-hosting with me, Batool.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a lovely
You've been
chat.
listening to Ramadan Radio London on 87.9 FM. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook. And also, there'll be plenty more of these. So join us every Monday night at 6 till 7. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.